The spire of Ictor loomed like a dark monument against the dying light of twin suns, its jagged silhouette sharp against the violet-hued sky. From its peak, strange energy beams arced outward, tracing patterns in the heavens that made the stars themselves seem dim by comparison. This was no mere structure. It was a symbol of power, of ancient knowledge, and of the interconnectedness of hundreds of alien species that had coexisted for millennia. At the base of the spire, the Agora of the Infinite sprawled, an enormous plaza where the galaxy's most influential beings gathered. Across the vast expanse of the Agora, figures of unimaginable diversity moved like a living tapestry. A being made entirely of liquid gold, flowing like mercury, slithered between a cluster of Nephiri, six-legged creatures with bioluminescent patterns pulsating from their chitinous bodies. They communicated through color changes, the shades shifting in time with their thoughts. The Nephiri spoke to a towering Seraphian, a bird-like race with feathers that seemed to shimmer with their own light, their voices sweet and melodic, but somehow incomprehensible to any human ear. In the center of the plaza, there was a fountain that didn't merely contain water but a swirling liquid matter from a distant galaxy, a rare substance called Xiphon, which could be used to fuel both technology and thought. The fountain stream bent at odd angles, as if gravity itself had been twisted into an art form. Surrounding the fountain were booths displaying intricate holographic designs, rare artifacts, and oddities that could only be crafted or found by beings whose understanding of the universe far surpassed human comprehension. The air hummed with energy, both tangible and invisible, as countless alien factions gathered for the Covenant of Gifting, an ancient ritual that allowed only the most esteemed and powerful to offer their services to those in need. This was no ordinary marketplace. Here, everything was for sale: knowledge, power, loyalty, even entire fleets of warships. The participants weren't just interested in trade. They were negotiating their very futures, forming alliances that could last for centuries or end in conflict as old as the stars themselves. For some, the Covenant was a moment of grand opportunity, a chance to further their status among the stars. But for others, it was the only shot at survival. A Zortaxian engineer, her body a writhing mass of ever-changing nanofibers, floated nearby, offering her expertise in quantum technology. Her dark eyes scanned the crowd, looking for the highest bidder. A Torvian warrior, her skin a deep shade of red, scanned the horizon for potential clients seeking her skills in combat tactics. The stakes were high, and only the cleverest and most powerful would leave here with what they sought. Among the sea of alien species, a single human stood out, a mother of two, her face weathered by years of hardship, but still filled with an unyielding determination. Lena Carter had never imagined that she'd be standing on the fringes of the Covenant of Gifting, let alone trying to offer something of worth in this alien marketplace. The human race was considered a curiosity by most of the galaxy's more advanced civilizations. They were too young, too inexperienced, and, at least in the eyes of many alien species, too fragile to offer anything of true value. And yet, here she was, hoping to prove herself. Lena's journey to this distant world had been anything but simple. A single mother who had lost her husband in a mining accident on Mars, she had spent years struggling to raise her children while working multiple jobs. The day she had received the invitation to Nexus Prime, an invitation to join the Covenant of Gifting, was nothing short of a miracle. It had been sent by a Kyraxian, an ancient species of advisors to the galaxy's most powerful leaders, who had recognized something in her, something beyond the human desperation that most aliens dismissed as weakness. Now, standing in the Agora, Lena couldn't help but feel small amidst the towering beings around her. Yet there was something about this place, this event, that made her feel like she was part of something bigger. She had spent years negotiating deals, managing resources, and learning the art of survival in a harsh world. Surely that counted for something. Her strength wasn't in combat or advanced technology, but in her ability to adapt, to understand people, even those not of her kind. As the seconds ticked away, the alien species gathered in greater numbers. The Goran, a reptilian species with glowing red eyes, began to form a circle around the fountain. Their heavy tails swished with anticipation as they waited for the ceremony to begin. The Tsaroth, a gaseous entity wrapped in containment field, drifted by, sending a whisper through the air, a sound that could only be interpreted as a warning or an offer, depending on who heard it. Lena adjusted the small, handheld device in her pocket. It was a gift from the Kyraxian, a universal translator designed to bridge the gap between languages and cultures. As she watched the alien delegates, Lena thought back to the message that had brought her here. "You have something no one else does, Lena Carter." The message had said, "The strength to unite, the will to survive, and the humanity to connect with those beyond your kind. The universe is full of wonders, and it needs someone like you." She didn't fully understand it, but she wasn't here to question the strange invitation. She was here to prove that even in a galaxy full of incomprehensible beings and advanced technologies, a mother's will, her strength, her drive to protect her children, could be as valuable as the most advanced weapon or the rarest knowledge. A voice boomed through the agora, drawing attention to the center of the fountain. It was time for the covenant of gifting to begin. Lena Carter stood at the edge of the agora of the infinite, taking in the vast expanse of the marketplace. It felt surreal. This wasn't the dusty corner of Earth where she'd spent most of her life, a single mother trying to make ends meet after the loss of her husband. This was Nexus Prime, a place where the most powerful beings in the galaxy congregated. And here she was, wearing a simple black jacket, worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. She wasn't like the others. Most of the aliens gathered around her looked as though they belonged to an entirely different reality. Their bodies shimmered with an otherworldly glow, their movements fluid and graceful. Some were towering figures with multiple limbs, their eyes gleaming with the wisdom of eons. Others resembled living constructs, beings of pure energy contained within protective spheres or crystalline forms that bent light itself. The air was thick with the hum of alien languages, and not a single one of them looked anything like Lena, but none of them had what she had. While others prepared by refining their technologies or rehearsing their speeches, Lena leaned casually against a stone pillar, surveying the scene. Her worn jacket, though well-maintained, had clearly seen better days. She wasn't carrying an arsenal of weapons or a spacecraft's worth of advanced tech. Instead, she clutched a small, holographic data pad in one hand, the only piece of modern technology that truly mattered to her. Lena wasn't sure why she'd been invited to Nexus Prime. She had no military prowess or vast knowledge of the galaxy's deepest mysteries. What she had, however, was a grit and determination to survive in a harsh world, a quality far rarer than any weapon or technology. And that was her secret weapon. She let out a sigh, rubbing the back of her neck. "I could really go for a coffee," she muttered to herself. Her words were barely audible over the low chatter of the alien crowd, but that didn't stop a few heads from turning. A Zarkal warrior, its forearms crossed and skin glistening with metallic scales, shot her a confused glance. Behind it, a Vilithian, an ethereal being composed of liquid light, seemed to flicker and shimmer in response to Lena's offhand remark. They had no idea what coffee was. "Excuse me, human." A voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Shindar, a diplomat from a species called the Gorians, a race of towering, humanoid creatures with eyes like glowing coals and skin that shifted in dark, metallic hues. He was both towering and terrifying, yet his voice was surprisingly soft. "You appear out of place. What is it you seek here?" Lena smiled, unfazed by the size of the Goran standing in front of her. "A chance," she said simply, eyes scanning the crowd of competitors. "Just like everyone else here, right?" Shindar's golden eyes narrowed slightly, as if considering whether to dismiss her entirely. The Goran was a highly intelligent species with an affinity for diplomacy and negotiation, but it was clear from his expression that he was skeptical of this human's place in the covenant of gifting. The human's presence here was an anomaly. The only reason she had been allowed to participate was because the Kyraxian, a race of ancient, enigmatic beings, had extended an invitation to her. No one had expected a human to be part of the equation. They were too young, too untested in galactic affairs. What could a single mother, from a backwater planet, possibly offer in a place where only the best and most prestigious were supposed to thrive? Lena didn't care. She'd already learned the hardest lesson of all, that survival often had little to do with what others thought of you and everything to do with how hard you fought to prove them wrong. "I'm not looking to compete," Lena continued, shrugging nonchalantly. "I'm just here to offer something people might actually want. Real solutions. The stuff that actually makes a difference." Shindar gave her a puzzled look, clearly unsure how to respond to the casual tone coming from someone so ordinary. But Lena didn't mind. She wasn't here to impress him or anyone else. She didn't need an elaborate presentation or an impressive array of gadgets and weapons. Her life had taught her that the most important tool was the ability to connect with people. It was something even the most advanced alien species had overlooked: the power of genuine human determination and empathy. Without another word, Lena slipped the data pad from her pocket and began walking toward one of the booths. The alien vendor, a creature with translucent skin and multiple floating appendages, looked up, eyeing her curiously. Lena offered a quick, friendly smile before glancing at the wares. "Anything good here?" she asked casually. The vendor blinked, or at least, Lena assumed it blinked. It was hard to tell with the alien species she was surrounded by. "Are you lost, human? You do not seem prepared for this event. Perhaps you should leave and return to your planet. This is not a place for simpletons." Lena didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing playfully. And then there was Zorith. The warlord's voice boomed through the arena as he addressed the crowd, sending ripples of tension through the assembled beings. "This year, the challenge is different." Zorith's voice echoed, his deep, resonant tone sending shivers down Lena's spine. "I have seen enough of the same tactics, the same games. This time, we will test something far greater than brute force or intellectual prowess. We will test resourcefulness, the ability to adapt." Lena's eyes narrowed. She knew where this was going. This wasn't going to be a contest of sheer power. It was going to be about survival, a test to see who could outthink and outmaneuver their competitors. For most, this was a game they were used to. For Lena, it was the only kind of game she had ever played, but it came with far higher stakes than she had ever imagined. "The challenge will be simple," Zora continued, his fiery eyes now fixated on Lena. "You will each be given a resource, something vital to the success of your goals. Your task is to turn it into something far greater, something that will determine your worth to the galaxy. Fail, and you will lose everything." Lena's stomach tightened. It wasn't just a challenge. It was a look in Zorith's eyes, the unspoken warning. This was a warlord who watched countless competitors fall to their arrogance, their hubris. And he wasn't going to go easy on her, because she was human. Lena's mind raced. She had no army, no starships, no advanced technologies. What could she possibly use to turn the tide? The odds stacked against her were overwhelming. Yet, something deep inside her refused to accept defeat. She was used to the feeling of being underestimated. She had spent her entire life proving others wrong, whether it was struggling to make ends meet as a single mother or fighting to keep her family together after the loss of her husband. This wasn't the first battle she'd fought. But this time, the arena was galactic, and the stakes were higher than ever before. As the covenant began, Lena took a deep breath, readying herself for the challenge ahead. The galaxy's most brilliant minds were about to see the one thing they hadn't accounted for: a human who didn't follow the rules. She wasn't here to play the game. They were, and in the end, she was going to make them regret ever underestimating her. Lena Carter stood at the edge of the Covenant of Gifting's arena, her eyes scanning the resource she had been given. A single weathered rock, a small, insignificant chunk of rock, no bigger than a grapefruit. The other competitors, sleek and sophisticated, had received crates filled with highly advanced materials, rare ores, pieces of alien technology, and even biological entities that could be engineered into deadly weapons. Meanwhile, Lena's rock seemed like an afterthought, a mistake even, a literal pebble in the pond. She stared at it for a long moment, then shrugged and tucked the rock into her backpack. "Well, let's make this interesting," she muttered to herself with a wry smile. "Can't do much with it, but I'll figure something out." Her competitors had already begun working. The Draxian warlord, a massive muscular figure, had immediately opened a holographic blueprint, beginning to carve through his allocated materials with his sharp claws. Vashari, the Chrysallian energy manipulator, floated in the air as glowing runes appeared in the air around her, each one a sigil of some grand design. Their precision and expertise were evident. These beings had centuries of experience, and their methods were cold, efficient, and calculated. Lena, on the other hand, had decided that the best place to start wasn't with the rock itself, but with a snack. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a protein bar, peeling it open. As she took a bite, she looked around at the other competitors, who were already deep in their work, barely glancing up. A Zortaxian passed by, his elongated, transparent body rippling with delicate silver veins. He took one look at Lena, then his tendrils twitched in what could only be described as confusion. "Human, you are not working," he observed, his voice a soft, harmonic hum. Lena shrugged, chewing her protein bar. No rush. Gotta get the creative juices flowing, right?" The Zortaxian blinked once, twice, and then made a soft whirring sound. It was the closest thing to a laugh she had heard in hours. As she finished her snack, Lena took a deep breath and approached her workbench, still holding her rock. There were no fancy tools in sight, just a table with some basic equipment. Most of the others had advanced workstations, precision tools, and holographic assistants guiding them through their complex plans. Lena had only her hands and her resourcefulness. Instead of reaching for the nearest tools, Lena placed the rock carefully on the table. Then she stepped back and surveyed the scene. She crossed her arms, tapping her foot. "Okay, Lena," she said aloud, as if trying to coax an answer out of the stone. "What do we got here?" Behind her, a Seraphian, a sleek, bird-like being whose feathers glowed with the light of 1,000 suns, paused mid-step, her eyes flickering what could only be described as disbelief. She had been watching Lena's process with growing concern. "You are not analyzing the rock?" the Seraphian asked, her voice melodic but clearly skeptical. Lena shook her head. "Nah, I'm more of a feel-it-out kind of person." The Seraphian blinked, clearly bewildered by this response. But Lena, undeterred, stretched her arms over her head, then let out a loud groan. "Okay, let's try this," she muttered to herself, then reached down and grabbed the rock with both hands. With a sudden burst of energy, she tossed it into the air and caught it again. It's all about the rhythm, right? Several competitors glanced up as Lena began to bounce the rock from hand to hand, performing a bizarre and strangely rhythmic routine. The Zarkul, a hulking figure with 4 arms, leaned forward, clearly perplexed. One of the Vilithians, an ethereal, glowing creature of liquid light, flickered in what might have been a form of confusion or amusement. Lena, however, remained focused. After a moment of tossing the rock, she paused and, with a theatrical flourish, slammed it down onto the workbench. "All right, I've got it," she announced, more to herself than anyone else. A little creativity never hurt anyone. She then started unzipping her bag again and pulled out a roll of duct tape. Her competitors stared at her, unsure whether to be impressed or appalled by her choice of materials. "What are you doing?" the Draxian warlord asked, his deep voice laced with incredulity. He stopped mid-action, his sharp claws hovering over his advanced tools, watching as Lena began wrapping her rock with tape. "Improvising," Lena said with a grin. "What can I say? If it works on Earth, it'll work here, right?" The Draxian didn't respond, his confusion evident. But Lena was already too far into her unconventional process to care. With the rock wrapped in duct tape, she began to carve lines into its surface, not with lasers or cutting tools, but with the edge of a simple plastic knife she'd found in her bag. The material felt foreign to her, yet the process was familiar. This wasn't about precision. It was about seeing things differently, thinking in ways others didn't. She didn't need advanced technology to prove her worth. "Why waste time trying to match them?" she muttered, carefully inspecting the rock's new shape. "Why not just make something unique?" She worked quickly, laughing quietly to herself as her competitors watched her, baffled by her irreverence. It wasn't elegant or efficient, but in that moment, Lena had realized that being different was exactly what she needed. No one else would think to use duct tape to wrap a rock or toss it in the air like a juggling ball. And in a place where everyone was trying to follow the rules of the game, Lena was determined to break them. By the time she finished, the rock didn't look like much. Certainly not anything a warlord or advanced technologist would admire. But it was hers. And in her eyes, that was all that mattered. With a mischievous smile, she stood back and surveyed the scene. "Well, let's see how this goes." The first match of the Covenant of Gifting was set to begin, and Lena Carter stood at the center of the arena, her heart pounding in her chest. Across from her stood Riser the Infinite, of Othraki, a being whose body consisted entirely of swirling nebulae, each star in his form pulsating with deep cosmic power. His ability to manipulate gravitational fields made him one of the most feared competitors in the tournament. Riser's very presence bent the air around him, creating small distortions in the fabric of reality itself. Lena couldn't help but blink in surprise. Well, this is dramatic. Riser's shimmering, cloud-like face stretched into something that might have been considered a smile. "You are out of your depth, human," he boomed, his voice a deep, sonorous echo. "Your rock, your meager resources, will be nothing before me." Lena grinned, still holding the duct-taped rock in her hand. "Oh, I'm not so sure about that. Let's see what happens." The match began, and immediately, Riser raised a hand, creating a small black hole in the center of the arena. It sucked in everything around it, a vacuum of pure, unrelenting gravity. Lena's heart skipped a beat as the pull of the black hole intensified. For a moment, she thought about her options. She could run, hide, or try to fight back with some of the gadgets the other competitors were using. But instead, she simply dropped her rock into the center of the gravitational anomaly. "Hope you're not too attached to that thing." Riser laughed, clearly certain he'd won. The rock was drawn in, but then something unexpected happened. As the rock passed to the event horizon, the duct tape began to unravel, the sticky strands catching on the dark energy swirling around it. In a flash, the rock exploded outward in a chaotic burst of momentum, scattering the gravitational pull into small, harmless debris. Lena squinted, shielding her eyes from the explosion of stardust. "Guess the tape works better than I thought." The black hole collapsing on itself, and Riser, caught off guard by the sudden disruption, lost control over the energy. He stumbled back as the gravitational field distorted in erratic ways. Lena, seizing the opportunity, grabbed a nearby piece of debris and tossed it at him, distracted him long enough to slam the rock, still wrapped in duct tape, into his cloud-like form. Riser's nebula body began to spin wildly, his energy disrupted by the unorthodox attack. "Impossible!" he cried, his form flickering. "I told you," Lena said with a cocky grin. "Don't underestimate a mom with a duct tape roll." The crowd, a mix of stunned silence and confused murmurs, watched in disbelief as Riser collapsed in on himself. In the end, he wasn't defeated by strength or sheer power, but by the unpredictability of a human who wasn't afraid to think outside the box. Lena had won, and though it had been messy, it was undeniable her methods were working. The second match was even more absurd. Lena faced Trexos, a Tyrillian, a race of hyper-intelligent beings that thrived on advanced logic, capable of projecting complex algorithms into real-time combat strategies. Trexos stood confidently in front of her, his multiple cerebral nodes glowing with neon blue data streams. "Your methods are primitive," Trexos remarked, almost patronizingly. "I will predict your every move." Lena gave him an exaggerated, thoughtful look before shrugging. "Cool. Good for you." Trexos' cerebral nodes whirred as he began to calculate. The data streams around him flickered and swirled, tracing patterns that Lena could barely comprehend. She could see the gears turning. His every move was preordained, efficient, and precise. Lena, however, wasn't a being of logic. She wasn't going to follow the pattern. Instead, she pulled out a small, innocuous device from her bag, an old-school laser pointer. She flicked it on, the tiny red dot bouncing across the arena. "What are you doing?" Trexos asked, clearly bewildered. His calculations faltered, the data streams momentarily disrupted. Lena grinned mischievously. "Just a little warm-up." She moved the laser out across the floor. "Follow the Trexos. Bet you can't predict this." The Tyrillian's nodes flickered, clearly struggling to keep up with the unpredictable movement of the laser. "This is an error in my calculations." Trexos growled, but it was too late. His focus was entirely on the tiny red light, and as he tried to analyze it, he became increasingly frustrated. The algorithms he had so meticulously prepared couldn't anticipate something so simple, so random. Lena's next move? Tossing a chair at him. Trexos tried to sidestep, but in his flustered state, his calculated movements couldn't keep up. The chair clattered into him, throwing him off balance and rendering him vulnerable. Lena lunged forward and knocked him out of the arena with a single, well-placed shove. "Always nice to disrupt the calculations," Lena quipped, wiping her hand together as if she had just finished a casual task. The audience erupted in stunned applause, and the other competitors could only gape in astonishment. While they'd been trying to outthink each other with precision and technology, Lena had used nothing but a bit of randomness and humor. By the time Lena entered the third round, the odds were starting to shift. Her unconventional tactics were beginning to catch the eye of the Covenant of Gifting's elite, and while the other competitors were sticking to their tried-and-true methods, Lena had learned one undeniable truth. Unpredictability was her greatest weapon. Whether it was the power of a simple protein bar, a laser pointer, or a roll of duct tape, she was proving that the universe could be outsmarted by a mother who wasn't afraid to bend the rules.